Hey, welcome to my basement, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you are all doing great out there and you've had a solid week and you are ready to have a very fun weekend. How about we start it off with an awesome conversation with the one and only Bill Roper, who I've known, I think, for about 25 years.
Yeah, crazy, right? At least, yeah, it's like way too long. Thank God we were both 6 when we met.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that is correct. And speaking about being 6 years old, I got an early birthday present as a super chat from Jonathan McFowle. That is very kind. And also the age that you put in there is also incredibly kind as well. Thank you, good sir. Hello to Alpha Cat and Sam I Am 111. Alpha Cat 1, he was the first person in the room today. Mike Williams, happy Friday. Hola. Coming with the enthusiasm. I love it. I've got Clayton Blair in there, Peter Kokasar, Nintendo Boy 17, Shirley Castle. Great to see you. We are going to have a lot of fun. But before we get into this conversation with this gentleman that has worked at Disney, worked at Blizzard, Cryptic Studios, I believe, for a long time. Hellgate London, was that, what was the studio
Flagship
called?
Studios.
What was it called?
Flagship Studios.
Flagship, of course. I can't even keep track of all of these different
I know.
properties and brands.
I got into it thinking I'd be like at one studio my whole career. And then, I've had the good fortune of getting to sample a lot.
Yes. Yeah, including a stint in London. We're going to get into all of that. But first, I have to give a shout out to our sponsor. Not only are they sponsoring the Rundown, but the Gaming Stadium is also sponsoring us. Now, they are Canada's leader in online esports tournament facilitation with tournaments every weekend, and you don't want to miss out on the action. You can join them at tgs.gg. That's tgs.gg. Please follow them on Twitter and give them a high five from me and a thank you from me. They are very cool people, and it's great that they're supporting us. So thank you, the Gaming Stadium. All right, Bill Roper is here, ladies and gentlemen, and Bill comes to us via Blizzard initially. Was that your very first stop?
Yeah, 1994. I was the 17th employee at Blizzard. I came by way of doing desktop publishing at Kinko's Copies, is where I was before that. And I actually had a really good friend, Stu Rose, who's still an artist in the industry, who worked there and said, hey, we've got a lot of projects going on right now, so we're doing some contracting for music. So the first thing I did was all the music for the PC version of Blackthorn, specifically.
That was your very first credit.
That was my very first credit was that.
When you look up Bill Roper on Wikipedia or Moby Games, that'll be the first thing that you.
Yeah, I hope it better be. But yeah, it was like the best. That was voted like best guy with a gun game because that's the kind of awards we have.
Blackthorn was awesome, man.
Yeah, it was great. The whole no look,
yes,
shotgun thing, it was great. Jim Lee did the cover art.
Yep.
Like nuts, right? So yeah, I did that as a contractor, and then right at the same time I was doing that, they were starting to promote an upcoming game called Warcraft: Orcs and Humans, and they had they were doing, I think it was Summer CES back in those days when they had two shows for Consumer Electronics Show, and that's where you went to show games. There was no E3 yet; that stuff didn't exist, and they said, hey, we've got this video footage that we've shot showing the game off, but we need some voiceover over the top of it to talk about what it is and what it's about. So I said, great. And I sent them a demo tape of me saying some stuff, and I put it over Mars from Holst the Planets.
Awesome.
They have this big epic sound. And I said, okay, here's an audition tape. And they brought me in. Glenn Stafford was the music person there at the time.
Yeah.
And Glenn sat me down in his office, which was the closet of the office building because it's the quietest place, right? No windows and doors. He created this closet with egg crates on the walls, sitting shoulder to shoulder in this little space. And he brings up this video fly through, and you can go find it online, where the camera's coming through some trees up to a castle. And in 1994, it was like, it was mind blowing. Right now, it's like sub Minecraft, but then it was like insanely good.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, here's where to talk about how orcs and humans are fighting. I said, is there a script? And no, there isn't. So I just grabbed a pen and some paper and started jotting down ideas, and that's where the whole
wait a second. So they brought you in to do voiceover, and you're creating lore for
Yeah, on the
Warcraft.
fly. Yeah. So it was
On the
basically, I
fly.
wrote some stuff down, and then it was like, in the age of chaos, two factions battled for dominance.
Oh my
The whole
God,
entity,
man.
orcish hordes, right? And just like writing all this stuff down, just like off the top of my head, writing it down. Welcome to the world of Warcraft. Is like,
Wow. Did you have to run it by people
no,
or
nope.
no?
I just wrote it. I ran it by Glenn. I'm
Okay.
like, what do you think? That sounds great. Okay, let's do it. Right. And recorded it. And then I guess they were like, that sounds epic. They're great. Sounds great.
What
Yeah.
did
And
you
then
draw
that,
on for that? What was your inspiration? Were you a big D&D fan? Did you
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
love this
I
space? Yeah.
played D&D original white box when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
So you
Um,
you knew enough about the kind of fantasy
yeah.
sphere to
Read a
not
lot of
copy something.
Tolkien, played a
You
lot of D&D,
Yeah, but you didn't just lift it. You kind of
yeah.
you started to
Yeah.
create your own in your own imagination.
Yeah, I did. And it was just this idea that I think just in that moment spawned me like, okay, all I know is that there's orcs and there's humans and they're fighting and the
Wow.
orcs are invading. And the only other piece of knowledge I got other than that was, and we want the bad guy's name to be Blackhand. Like that was it. That was the entirety of the lore.
Holy crap.
So I started in that first thing, just like, okay, here's this, and they invaded. And it was, if you go back and listen to it, it's vague enough where it still gives you a flavor, but there's
Sure.
not, a lot of minutia. And then when I actually got hired on there, I basically sent a letter. I don't even know if it was an email. It might have been an email at the time,
Mm-hmm.
where I said, like, I had a great time doing the music. I really want to work in games. I've played games my whole life. I'll do anything to work there. Alan Adham was president at the time. I knew he had just bought a new car. And I'm like, Alan, I'll wash your car. I'll manage the bulletin boards. I'll do tech support. Mike Morheim, I knew, was a big Magic player because Magic the Gathering was new. So we all were getting into it. I said, Mike, I'll give you my Rock Hydra because it was like a rare, right? I'm like, I'm bribing them. I'll do anything. Let me work there. And so they brought me in and they hired me. I took a pay cut from working at Kinko's to start at Blizzard. I made more money doing desktop publishing and graveyard shifts or a copy store than I did starting at Blizzard. And Alan, I remember like the very first meeting, he said, well, I don't know if we really have enough for you to do, but we kind of like where you're coming from. And so we're going to give you a job. That's amazing. I never stopped running from like that day. Like I always had plenty of stuff to do.
I bet. How much did your initial kind of, your spur of the moment lore that you went into the recording booth for that CES show for Warcraft 1, how much did that sort of stick? And was that part of what ended up in the game?
Yeah, it really was. Because that was the first thing that Alan asked. He said, so he's like, you can do writing, right? You wrote that little intro piece. I said, yeah, I just did it in the room. And he said, great. And then he told me the extent of the lore, which I have already shared with you. And he said, he goes, we need to like have all the rest of it. So amazing. Fortunately, I was, still naive enough to not recognize what this really meant. I was just like, oh, cool, I get to write up a campaign world, which I love doing anyway. So the vast majority of my first 6 months at the company was originating the Warcraft lore, coming up with all the names for everybody like Medivh and Garona and Grom Hellscream and all these different things.
From Kinko's to writing the lore of Warcraft.
And then still using my Kinko's desktop publishing knowledge by creating the manual as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things I loved about Blizzard, especially in those early days, is we were always trying to find like different interesting ways to do stuff that was going to like really engage people, like really capture their imagination.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, does that extend into the physical goods we're putting out? Like, I want to do something really weird with the manual. It's like, what do you want to do with the manual? I said, well, I want it to be not on like white paper. I want it on this parchment type paper, right? Because that's what I've been doing. I've been like just where I came from, right? So
yeah.
Printing knowledge. So, and I want it to be where you start with the humans and you read all the way to the half of the book. You open it up, that's what the map is. And then if you flip the book over, you read the other direction to read the orcs, right? I'm like, so yeah, like, because it's 50-50. And they were like, okay, that sounds really cool. Do that. I'm like, yeah, you can read either side depending which one to start by playing. And then the last thing I said was like, and what'd be really cool is like, we should use this like, it's a card stock, but it's like a leatherette looking card stock, this textured cover for it. So it really looks and feels like it's this tome or something. So we did that, and of course, Davidson and Associates, who owned, were the owners of the company at the time, complained because it was expensive. And then Alan said, "You know what else we need to do? We need to put a notepad in the box." And they were like, "A notepad? Why would you put a notepad in? It's a video game, and it costs like 3 cents more, a game, and it's heavier, so it costs more to ship." And Alan was just so brilliant. He said, "Because nobody knows who we are."
Yeah.
And they're going to see another game on the shelf they're thinking about buying.
Right.
And they're going to walk in and pick up that game and pick up our game. And they're going to say, "Wow, this has got some heft. I bet you this is a better game." Even though it's all digital, didn't matter. He knew that that's a part of the human condition of comparing value.
For sure.
And something like that is something heavier. So we did.
Well, just I mean, that's Blizzard mythology making right there, Blizzard became known as this austere, prominent, beautifully, designed company. Like every element was fetishized and perfected and tuned before it was revealed to the world.
Yeah. And I think we shipped those pads in like Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, maybe StarCraft, Diablo. But the reason those stick out in my mind is at one point, and I'm sure they have this in the archives at Blizzard.
Yeah.
At one point, we got a letter, and it was from the team that did the original. Oh God, now it just fell out of my head. The team shooter, like the very first team shooter.
Unreal or
yeah, but it was oh my God, the one that came in, like there was a version of it in the orange box, and I'm
Team
totally
Fortress.
spacing. Yes, the first Team Fortress. Thank you for saying it. My brain just went.
Oh yeah, no worries. We have between the two of us, we have 10,000 video game names in our brains. All of you need to excuse us if a few drop out. Okay,
they're gonna fall out. They just are. But I'm gonna remember weird stuff, like I'm gonna tell you.
Totally
forgetting the title of the game. But the original team that created the first Team Fortress, sent a letter saying and it had just come out. It was doing really well, and people were excited about it. And they said, "Hey, just so you all there know, we did the original design thumbnail on a Blizzard notepad, and they sent us the page that was the original design layout of oh, here's going to be the different classes and how their first sketch of Team Fortress." So I'm sure they've got that in the Blizzard archives, but
that's wonderful.
Hey, that paid off pretty cool. Somebody used the notepad and made a pretty good game,
my wife put on the alarm as she was leaving. It's like, oh no, everything's gonna go beeping. I've had that once. I was shooting an EP live in the Vancouver Film School, and the fire alarm went off right in the middle of the shoot. And I was like, what? What do I do right now? But you just
that's
keep going.
How you know it's live.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So when did you all sort of know that this was catching fire at Blizzard? Because the company already had a history of you did a Justice League game, you did Blackthorn, there's Rock and Roll Racing, Lost Vikings. There were already some really cool brands and games, but when did Blizzard become Blizzard? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that it was there in those earlier games. If you look at Lost Vikings, especially the humor and the cleverness of design, all that foundation was there. And it was really interesting because I think even when Warcraft Orcs and Humans came out, we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I remember a conversation with Davidson Associates. I think Bob and Jan might have come down, and they were letting us know, hey, we're going to really bet on this. We're going to ship 100,000 copies of the game, which at that time,
that's a lot. Yeah.
We're never going to sell that, right?
That's still a lot in 2021, Yeah,
that still be a lot today.
Yeah.
And that was crazy in 1994.
Yeah.
But it did well. It was critically acclaimed. And then when we did the sequel, I think that's when we knew. Warcraft 2 was, I always think of as really magical. We shipped that game in a year.
Wow.
So look at Warcraft 2, look at everything that's in there. That was done in about 11 months.
By how many people?
Probably by, at that point, maybe 30 of us, I guess.
Wow.
But that's everything. And it is one of those things where every design decision was the right one. Every pixel that hit the screen for art was the right thing, right? it all just kind of happened. And maybe it's because we flowed right into it. We weren't immediately going to make Warcraft 2. There was ideas of, well, we knew we were going to make Warcraft 2, but where would we set it?
Right.
And there was this very brief conversation in a meeting where we're all sitting on the floor in Alan's office, like, well, what should we do next? And one of the designers got up and pitched this whole opening cinematic. Like, here's the stage, and it's orcs, or it's humans fighting ghosts and orcs, but it's the orcs on dragons, and then humans coming in F-15s, and it's like modern day, and we're all and we're like,
in a year, yeah,
no, yeah, and well, we didn't really have a timeline. We're just like, oh, we think we just want to keep it just pure fantasy, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, we were always talking with other people about what could we do, right? Like recently there was a thing on Twitter where it was like, post your top 3 movie flexes. What's the coolest thing you've done in a movie?
Yeah.
And one of mine was, we went to go see Braveheart with Gary Gygax. Amazing. Because we were talking with them about maybe we should do D&D,
right,
instead of this Warcraft thing moving forward, right? Yeah. We didn't, obviously, and probably for the better for at least Blizzard, right? It was paid off. But yeah, I think by the time Warcraft 2 came out, like, we felt really good about it. It looked really good. We were doing some really innovative stuff in terms of multiplayer, and that's one of the things that I think sometimes gets overlooked in the Blizzard story, is how much technology got done for those games.
Yeah.
The gameplay's great, the art's great, the humor's great, incredible cinematics. But you look at Warcraft 2, we had, I think it was 8 players on a LAN in SVGA, right? And people were like, that's impossible. You'll never get that many pixels moving on a screen over a network. It was, when we did it. And we know that pushed back the Command and Conquer game, because they were single player.
Right.
Or they were 2-player, I think.
Yeah,
and like, we've got to move to multiplayer. And we know we shifted their schedule by at least 6 months. And
they were just down the street. Oh, well, no, at that time they were in Vegas.
Yeah, they were in Vegas. But the thing that was great about that is, I really think, while we were building along with, with them on Command and Conquer, like, I really felt it was like we kept having to like do better than the other. Like, we built on the shoulders of each of the other's accomplishments to create this real-time strategy genre. And it was that was truly a healthy competition. Like, that was what that was about. They would do something, we're like, that's cool, we got to do better than that. And they would see we're doing something, like, oh no, we got to beat them on that. And it became this, I think, really healthy rivalry.
Were you guys poaching from each other's teams?
No,
Okay.
that really didn't happen, which I thought was also really cool. It was just this is us, we're making this thing. And they were the same way. And we'd meet them sometimes. I think there was a bunch of them out at one point visiting Interplay, which was just down the road.
Sure, yeah.
And so we had a big paintball game with them.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, it was really cool. And I got to know Loose Castle really well. And like it was a very positive thing, by the end.
And honestly, like, those were 2 of the biggest games in the whole business, but they were really like the tentpole, like the giant kind of games that people would point to for PC games as well. They really legitimized the PC gaming experience, and it's funny to see what has kind of happened with real-time strategy. It still exists. It's still a successful genre, but I don't think it ever has gotten back to the status of Age of Empires and Command and Conquer. And
I agree. I mean, it's kind of a fascinating journey. Well, I was in Probable, which was when I was in London. You mentioned I was working in London, right? Which is a gaming tech company. I wrote up a bunch of stuff that was kind of like, so we had a lot of people that weren't gamers there or coming from the gaming industry. Right. So I would write up all this documentation. I'm like, oh, here's the history of gaming. Here's the history of these genres, and do presentations and things. And one of them, I said, the kind of the path of real-time strategy and strategy games is really fascinating. Because before, Hertz like Zwei, arguably, and Dune 2, right, it was all turn-based strategy. And I remember having to explain to our PR person that we worked with when the Warcraft was coming out, it's like, so this is real-time strategy. And this is what the difference is between turn-based is like chess. You go and I go and everything. Real-time strategy is like, we're both playing chess, but we're moving our pieces whenever we want to, right? You're just trying to find like some basic way to get the idea out there.
And when you describe it like that, it sounds impossible to play.
Yes.
But somehow you made it possible to play, addictive, and popular.
Yeah, and popular. And you look at that. So you had, real-time strategy, which started out single player and then went to, 2-player and then went to multiplayer.
Yep.
Right. And then went to like lots of people playing.
Yep.
And then you started seeing it really shift. Right. One of the things I thought was great is by the time you got to Dune 2 and Command and Conquer and Warcraft were very much, you had two sides and they were very equal.
Yeah.
Then we did StarCraft. Now you have three sides and they're all very different in how they play. Mm-hmm. So you have this like very grandiose rock, paper, scissors strategizing that now needs to start happening. Right. At that same time. And to me, that's always kind of been the pinnacle of real-time strategy because of the explosion of popularity in South Korea.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And the PC bongs that opened and the esports that occurred around it. And, it just phenomenal and mind-boggling to this day.
Totally. And you were at Blizzard during all of that.
Yeah, I was. We did a lot of stuff in like that. I'm just looking over at my bookcase. Like I have, see, I'm going to move. Yeah, it's live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the wake of all that, right, there was actually this book that got written called Starkonomics.
Yeah.
Which is a South Korean book, right, that talks about like the history of StarCraft and gaming in South Korea and how basically StarCraft created this new economy in their country.
It's the father of esports.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It really is.
Yes.
And not that it was intended to be, it's just, It grew up around it. And so we did, there was a lot of tech. And when we added add-ons, we came out with the expansion for StarCraft, right? We came with Brood War. We put in a bunch of things that let you have like invisible players that you could then use, that basically esports broadcasters could use to move around the board.
Right.
Right. So they could be showing you different ways. Like we're like, what can we do for like TV camera controls in our engine? Basically, we built in a replay system where you could save your game file out afterwards. They were really small because all it did was send it to somebody else's system, and then they used the game engine to replay all the moves, right? Amazing. So it's just all the moves we sent. So we had to do a lot of stuff to really have that happen. And then when we got to Warcraft 3, that again was another change of going to this, what we called an RPS, a role-playing strategy game, which we tried to make stick, and it didn't, but we called it that. And that was all about the heroes. And then that to me is where things just blew up because now Dota happens, which spawns League of Legends, right? And now you've got the whole MOBA that comes out of that. You've got all these excursions into other types of strategy games. Tower Defense was another game that came out of Warcraft 3.
Yeah. Because
people were building these like, hey, we have this idea of like having to defend these towers, right? That spawned a whole nother genre of game.
And then Blizzard flips all that around and does hero shooting.
Right.
And says, this was lifted to create a whole new genre. Why don't we make Overwatch about the characters and the heroes that we're going to invest in? Amazing.
Yeah, it's really humbling to have been a part of that, and that's on the strategy side. Diablo was the RPG that we made when everyone said, why are you making an RPG? RPGs are dead.
Right. Well, and what's funny is when you think about Blizzard as a strategy, cerebral game maker, a game company that really understands lore crafting and myth building, it doesn't compute that it's a massive player in esports. It doesn't somehow correlate that, nope, this is the evolution of Blizzard is so tied into arenas filled with people watching, televised competition around these titles. That must be so mind-blowing for the 17th employee of the company.
It is. I mean, I still, when I was at Disney, I went over there with some of the Marvel team, the games team, to meet with some South Korean publishers. Like, hey, would you come along? All of them. Like, oh yeah, happy to. And we met with one. They said, like, oh, we want to take you to a tournament tonight. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And I was like the only person in the room who knew what that meant.
Yeah.
Because I'd been to them. So we went, and this is like 2012, 2011, 2012, right? Yeah. And we go to a mall that has like this big space. They have basically like an esports arena inside this mall. It's StarCraft tournament. people are like there and they know the game intimately. They love the players. They know them. It was kind of embarrassing. Like they found out I was there. They put a camera on me and I'm like waving and, and the people I'm with are like, oh, now we understand why everybody's been staring at you.
That's amazing.
Right. And I said, yeah, it's the association of what we did because it became so ingrained there in the culture.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing and humbling and, and surreal. Right.
I'm reading Ready Player 2 right now. Have you picked this book up yet? It's so, Ernie Klein does this thing where he really, well, you know about Ready Player 1. You saw the Spielberg movie, I would imagine. Like he really kind of connects the dots to all of these creative brands and all of this imagination that game developers and movie makers and TV show people have put out into the world. But there's this meta connection to it all. And that must be what it's like for you and other members of your team to go to South Korea and basically be, there's an awareness, there's a hero worship thing that happens there because of the cultural sort of awareness of the value of your work, which must be surreal.
And it's really interesting, like Ready Player One. Actually, when that book came out, my wife and I read it to each other. We sat on the couch and read chapters back and forth.
Yeah.
And obviously very the cultural touchstone, dive into everything I grew up with and love. And I think the thing that is really interesting is I remember one time I went to South Korea and it was before a massive, massive tournament, like probably like 85,000 people in this huge sports arena. And I think we were promoting maybe War 3 at the time.
Yeah.
And so they put me at a table to sign autographs, but I was out there with esports players.
Wow.
And like, I had like a nice little line that every now and then someone would show up, right? Because it's like the difference of like, oh, hi, I made basketball. And it's like, yeah, but I'm gonna go get LeBron James's autograph.
Totally, yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah. And hundreds of people lined up, with flowers and dolls and like all kinds of things, gifts to bring to their favorite esports players. And It's like, wow, like that is so meaningful. It's like a thing we made, a game, right? To have people enjoy and everything has created all of this.
It's meta. It is. I mean, it's another layer. It's competition, which is a layer of entertainment. It's like layers of entertainment and expression and appreciation, and I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about video games that has always been there, like a movie like Tron doesn't come out in 1982 and have the impact that it does on our generation if there isn't more than just dropping a quarter and losing time in video games, right? Like people were completely connected to the storytelling and the imagination of game makers back then. Let's talk about the 80s and getting indoctrinated. Were you a fan of the arcade stuff? And
I lived in the arcades.
Did you? Yeah.
I've been a gamer since I was a little kid, and my parents taught me games to learn math, right? My dad taught me blackjack to quickly count to 21, and my mom taught me cribbage because that's all about 15 and 31, right? So they were using cards and numbers to engage me in gameplay for like, let's help improve your basic math skills. And so I've always credited and blamed them for anything that happened. And so I grew up playing that. I mean, D&D came out in 77. So like this is insane. The same year I went out and stood in line to see Star Wars, the first Star Wars, episode 4, when I was 12, right? Was the same year I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, like just cultural milestones.
Amazing. For
people of an age, right? And so through the 80s, I was playing all these things. I was playing tons of D&D, and I'd go and see movies and then go to the arcade. My mom was in a bowling league, and she'd be like, oh yeah, here's $3 in quarters. Go to the little arcade in the bowling alley, right? Because that was everywhere. And we actually, my parents were friends with, I don't remember who it was, but somebody who worked at Atari, and we had a Pong, like that very first Christmas they were available. Like, they go like, oh, do you think your son might like this? So even as far back as that, like I had, I was playing Pong on the television.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Where
I grew
did you
up,
grow up in Southern California, or did you?
I grew up in Northern California, up in
Okay.
the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay, cool.
And it was amazing. Like my parents were always, as long as I was a good kid and kept my grades up, were super supportive of all that stuff. Except the one time they threw away all my D&D stuff because they felt prey to that
Ooh.
kids are going to start believing in the devil and like
Oh
get
no.
lost in sewers. And like, then I was like, no. And you just threw away like hundreds of dollars
Oh
worth of all my
man.
D&D stuff
Oh
that I
no.
worked all summer to buy. But okay.
Did
Yeah,
you
it didn't
patch
go well.
things up?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, eventually, yeah, we did. But the thing that was really fascinating is that, we were that first generation, I really feel like kids that got raised on gaming as a primary entertainment source,
Yes.
right? I
Yeah.
played tabletop RPGs. I played board games. I played video games. I started
They didn't need to
seeing,
sell it to us, right?
no, that's
And I
just,
think
it
the
was cool.
previous generation, like our parents, they need to be convinced. But
Right.
we grew up and we were like, okay, well, this is our gospel. We believe
Yeah,
this.
this is it. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing now, right, to where we've got second and, even third generation now, people starting to come into the gaming industry,
Yeah.
right? Because it's been around just, I still think of us as a young industry, but
Yep.
it's that, that old enough now. And I mean, I remember like I had a Commodore 128 at home, and my best friend had an Apple II. And depending on what game came out where, he'd either come to my house and we play it, or I go to his house and we play it. I remember going to one of this weird, almost like flea market swap meet for consumer electronics and games, and buying from Surtec in a plastic bag the first Wizardry.
Yeah.
And then later to be so fortunate to be able to meet people like Brenda Romero or John, like people like, I played your stuff.
Yeah.
Like this is formative for me,
Yeah.
And
I was the same, man. And it wasn't, I mean, like I got to meet you, like it's just incredible that the business reaches so many people, but it's also very open, and you were talking
and it's
about
small.
But you were talking about sharing a table with esports athletes, and this is my thing back to the esports community. And I talk about this all the time. People always ask me to produce esports stuff, and it's like, okay, but if we're not talking about the people that make these things, then you are cutting off your own tail. Because if you're not inspiring the next generation of game makers, what are the players going to play? Are we just going to always have League of Legends? That's it, or are we going to shake this up and inspire people to be creators? And you need to express that out there.
That's the big difference, right, between esports and sports, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. They're not coming up with, well, what's the next football?
Yeah.
It's the next American football or the next footy or the next basketball. There's like, these are the sports, and they make rule changes, but they're still predominantly the same.
Right.
Whereas that doesn't really work in video games, right? Even if you're like, you look at now and it's like, yeah, there's, there is still real-time strategy, but it's not like you would have said like, well, there's real-time strategy and first-person shooter and, maybe some like recreation of physical sports games like Madden or something. And that's it. And they go, no, like there's always new ways to do things. The technology allows us to create new ways of playing, new thoughts come up in terms of like, well, what can we do for game mechanics? What's a crazy thing I thought of? Like, can you imagine if there was never like Rocket League never got made? That'd be crazy, right? Yeah. Just like there's so many great games that come out through experimentation and trying them. And I think you're absolutely right, Victor. Like you've got to have this way to inspire the creatives to make the next stuff as well as people to play them.
And this is the thing that I'm obviously biased because my whole career, my whole life has been to that outreach, right? To go and visit people at studios. But I feel like that is really missing in media right now, and then on YouTube, everywhere. It's a lot of experts, it's a lot of people that know a lot and make good material. But I feel like that connection to creatives is a little bit splintered and broken right now, and it shouldn't be.
It's our industry a bit too, right? I mean, I always feel like for a lot of years you've been doing God's work in not only from the journalistic side, but then like putting on award shows and like trying to bring that spotlight to the people that make the games, right? And we are not like Hollywood in that way. right? There's you can look at, one of the biggest, stars you could think of in the gaming industry. And it's not like somebody goes to them like they do a director and it's like, oh, hey, you know what? I want to pay you $22 million to make a game. That's outside your budget.
Yeah.
That's outside your talent. Like, I'm just going to pay you that because you're going to drive that kind of revenue. That doesn't happen.
No.
Right. There is no, even though I would say that there are people as creative
Bill, it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. Right. And it hasn't happened to the point. I think there's been some risks, like maybe a license risk, or maybe, like Peter Jackson maybe had some real input on the King Kong game or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen that massive hit happen where there's a name attached to it and that makes all the difference. Hideo Kojima maybe.
Sure. I think there's some that are like that, but it's interesting because I don't think our industry
doesn't
pays that same attention or respect or places that same value on it, right? Like,
yes, and that too,
Steven Spielberg, yes, visionary, incredible filmmaker. We know if he makes a film, it's going to put butts in seats. So we're going to like give him as an individual, right, creative lead, like a ton of cash and a ton of authority and a ton of autonomy, within our structure. But to go and create that vision, that just, for the most part, and I know I picked an outlier there, but I think there are far more at a far greater level in Hollywood, of that level of people, of directors, right, that can go do that, than as a game director or a designer or anything.
And you know what? All of that stuff is greenlit based on the name, and the talent and how much box office they've drawn. Whereas in games, it's got very little to do with the people. It's all about the brand and whether it's a sequel and the people. Well, and that's been consistent. It's like the people are replaceable. Like if you look at Activision and Atari, like they right back to the 80s, Activision, was spun off by angry Atari people that were not getting the credit or the money that they thought they deserved.
Right.
And Atari said, "Screw it. There's people that are waiting outside our door to come and make games for us. Bye."
Right.
And like, I don't know, it's a weird business, right? It's almost like it forgets that it's an entertainment business made by humans.
It absolutely does. And I think that more so than any other entertainment business, we are assisted by and driven by metrics and data, right? Because of where we live. So it becomes easier to say, as long as I'm running the right KPIs and I've got the right data coming in, like I just need bodies to make a thing, because I'm going to use, all of my data stream to determine where my choke points are for monetization. Like it's almost like mobile gaming and free to play gaming. Yeah. Like it was a massive boost to the industry.
Yes.
And has brought in like an incredible number of people into gaming, but it's also reduced the specialness of individuals.
Oh man, 100%. And also gaming in general. Gaming has always tried to shrug off this disposable kind of time-wasting, slander around itself. It's always had this reputation as being something that, you just kill time with. Right. And that's exactly what free-to-play and mobile, which is, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But that's what they tap into. And the other thing, just like Iwata was always saying, is that once you introduce that into the equation, you are evaporating value. You are taking value out of the equation. And so now every discussion around games is equatable to, what are you paying per minute or per hour?
Right.
And it's always about what's the cost to the, and it's.
And by the way, if you look at it that way, games monetize worse than any other entertainment medium, including books, right? The amount of time, the amount of money you pay for a book and the amount of time it takes you to read it, right? And if you're equating it there, how much time it took me versus how much it cost me, games are the worst for the creator. Right. Because you'll have a game where it's like, yes, let's say to create that, to buy that game, right? This is about retail price. I spent even, $70 in a game, which is a lot for a lot of people.
Yes,
right?
It is.
That you are then, depending on the game, going to play for hundreds of hours. Let's say you even play it for 80 hours, right? It's like you played $1 an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, what other games are so replayable as well.
Yeah, and they're replayable, right? Like you go see a movie. And, back when we could all go to movie theaters, right? Or you stream it or whatever. Like I go see a first run film, and by the time I get done, it's going to cost me $20 or $30 to go see that movie for 2 to maybe 2.5 hours of entertainment.
Yes.
Right. I could go buy Rocket League for $20 and be playing it for years. Right. And that's the thing that
you don't even have to buy Rocket League now, though.
I know. Well, now you have to buy it. Right. It's free. I just go play it for free forever. You know, and I think that's the thing is that gets missed in all this is that part of the creative process is making something that's so fun and so engaging and so compelling and charming and whatever else you want to put on there that people want to keep coming back and doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And that does not get done with algorithms. That does not get done by an AI.
No.
At least not yet.
Yeah.
Right. But
the stuff that people are making is now fighting this kind of robotically designed and crafted and marketed stuff that's out there. And it's, you know, it's good for the business in general because you can sort of put all of those numbers into a big bucket and say we're reaching 1 billion people playing games, which I think is a holy grail that the industry's been wanting to reach for a long time. But I would say that we want 1 billion people that are invested in the notion of why games are worth their time rather than people sitting. I mean, I say this all the time, but the thing that just breaks my heart is walking down an aisle on an airplane. Remember airplanes? They were so fun.
I remember them.
Yeah. They were cool. But you'd walk down an aisle on an airplane and you'd see people just on their match 3 game, and nothing against match 3, but everybody's got a phone and they're all playing Candy Crush. And, you know, I know it's made Activision a ton of money, but it's just, it just kills me. You know, like I just know that there's so many other way better video game ways that you could spend your time if you just lifted up your head and weren't afraid to spend a little bit of money and a little bit of time finding this art that exists out there.
Yeah, you know? I think like it's really interesting. I mean, before I got to Disney, I'd never done anything in the free-to-play space. Mm-hmm. I was very much that grognard who was like, you got to pay your money for it. We put all the time into it, you know. And then I started looking at those audiences, looking at how to engage players in that way, and I became a lot more open to the concept and creation of free-to-play games. And then where my rub started becoming into what I think of as ethical monetization. Yeah. Right. Like one of the games we did that did exceptionally well was Frozen Freefall. And one of the things I was very proud about that we did that with a partner studio in co-development. And I had a team there. My creative team, Central Creative, was a group that I led that had gaming disciplines and marketing disciplines and presentations and videos and music. And like, you know, I had this group about 35 or 40 people that worked across all of Interactive. And the thing I was really happy about with Frozen Freefall was that we used more carrot than stick for monetization. Yeah. Right. It was like you got time to play it and to fall in love with it and enjoy the characters. Right. And there was a lot of characterization in it too, because Disney's very much about story and characters. So it was less about, I mean, it was kind of the first game, like casual game in that setting, especially match 3, where you didn't have a little character portrait in a circle in the corner. Right. We had the full character. And when you did a match, like Elsa would be excited or she'd be, when you lost a level, because we wanted you to connect to the characters in the world. And the game board was like integrated into the way it looked. So artistically, very Disney, very the way we think about it. But then, you know, on the monetization side, you know, I definitely had views of what Disney was like before I got there. Yeah. And then, but internally, one of the things that gets talked about a lot is over delivering, right? Like when people go to Disneyland, you commonly do not hear them walk away and go, man, that was super expensive and I feel ripped off. Totally. Right. They're like, yes, I had to save up all year to go, but what a magical experience. Yeah. Right. And so much detail. And like, when can we go again?
For 60 years, they've been doing that.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing. I know.
Yeah. And at one point at Disney Interactive, we had kind of an internal motto was interactive moments, Disney memories. Right. So we had this idea of like, we wanted things to happen in an interactive way in these moments that would create those memories. And part of that is not having you take a game and go like, man, I can't believe they're choking me for cash. Boom. Right. Right. And throw the phone down. Right. So we were generous in that way on Frozen Freefall. right? Yes, there's monetization, and yes, there's points you're like, oh man, if I just had this 3 more moves, I could have got through that. But boy, that doesn't start until a lot later down. And what we found is that people really appreciated that. They're like, I feel like I actually could play this a lot before. So it didn't feel like you were getting into my wallet, which happens when everything is run purely from a data stream KPI standpoint.
I've talked to a lot of AAA devs that have made the move quite comfortably to making mobile. And there's a lot of people that I know that have made that move. And they say they never want to go back to AAA. Obviously there's monetary benefits, but or quality of life, and I don't mean to be dismissive of that space. I think what's incredible about mobile is, yes, it does put games in the hands of people that, prior to the sort of growth and explosive growth of mobile, they probably wouldn't even care. They just watch whatever's on cable TV or go to the movies, or they just wouldn't get into games at all. And I think mobile has really blown all of that out. But I have this theory that a lot of people that make video games, that's kind of how they play games. When you're making a game, you're kind of playing the game, because I know that you're all fans of games. And what I know about game makers is that they don't always have time to play, like the competitor stuff. They run out of time. They're working all day.
Yep.
And so I think that the challenge of game making in the mobile space has been something that a lot of AAA devs have been rewarded by, because they have had to try to adapt a lot of principles and design ideas and marketing kind of reasoning. And I pose this question to you. Did it feel like that to you? Was it like learning it all over again? And was it kind of like you were playing a new game, reaching a whole new audience?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things about being fortunate enough to have some longevity in this industry is that it changes all the time. Like every 3 years, it's completely new.
Yeah.
There's a new platform that comes out. There's a new style of game that comes out. There's a new monetization schema that comes out. There's new countries that are bringing like completely diverse talent into the scope, right? Like we look at South Korea now as a great example, and like the great games that come out of there, and the talented artists and the design. It's like there was a time when they didn't do anything in gaming. They weren't a part of the picture, right? And then their government embraced video games as a way to marry youth and education, right, and sciences and improving their economy
and business, for sure,
and business. And so they became positively involved. Boy, this is a thing I wish that the United States of America would lean into, right? Like this is not a thing that is a time waster and dumb and for kids. It's like, we make more money as an industry than television and film put together. We make more money than I think the top 3 or 4 sports put together, right?
Right.
It's big business. So if you want to think of it from that way, great, tackle that. But more importantly, right, it is something that is an ingrained part of the youth of America, right?
Yeah.
I have a 4, almost 5-year-old now.
Yeah.
And when I started at Disney, I had no connection to what having a kid was like. I had my eyes opened, like, wow, there's a whole different type of games outside of Diablo and Hellgate, right, that exists, and different ways of playing and different platforms you play on. And like, what does it mean when you're making a game for a handheld device that's all about educating kids, right? What's it like for making something on the Wii, which I'd never done? Like all these new platforms and new game types. And, what's it like when you're making a game about Mickey? Like that's a very, very different thing. That was also the first time I had to work with other people's properties, right? Up until that point, everything I'd done was like, we're making the IP. Like a lot of times I got to make the call, like, no, I don't like that. Yes, that character can do that. Like it's very different when you're in the driver's seat than when you're having to go to someone and gain that respect for what they've created. Right.
And make the case for decisions and stuff.
Yeah. We didn't just grab whatever we wanted for Disney Infinity, right? Like you've got to go in and say, I want to have Rapunzel.
Was that to Bob Iger?
No, Bob, we did get some meetings with Bob, and those were always like incredibly amazing and impressive and a little stressful because it's Bob Iger. But if we wanted to work, like if we want to do Pixar stuff, right, we've got to talk with John, and we've got to talk with Peter Doctorow. Like, depends on who built that franchise up,
Right.
right? But I mean, in Infinity originally, before I was on the project, when the team at Avalanche in Utah, right, and John Vignacchi was a
Yep.
part of that at the time, and John Blackburn, and they had this great relationship with Pixar because of the previous games they'd done with them. They originally went and pitched in like, hey, we want to take this toy box idea we had from the Toy Story 2 game, and we want to make that the center point for this new big game idea we have. We're going to like mix all these properties. And they talked about it. And the first response back, right, was no, because you just can't throw all this stuff together for no reason.
Right.
What's the reason? What's the story? How do they connect, right? And that led to a lot of work, and especially from the art team, where they came back and there was this singular image that was Sully and Mr. Incredible, and like they grabbed a bunch of Pixar characters like in an action scene, right? Lightning McQueen, but they all look like toys. They all look like they're part of the same toy line, and it's obvious that they're in a toy world. And that was that first inkling of, look, they're not the characters. They're toys of the characters. They're self-aware, right? They know they're not the characters. And this is the digital living room floor. Kids go and they grab all their favorite toys, and I watch my son do it all the time. He doesn't care if they're from the same company or IP or franchise. He's just like, he likes these two playing together. He's constantly making stories like, today we're going to play Octonauts and the Odd Squad, like, help out Dino Trucks, because he's like, okay, awesome. And you go with it. It's imagination, right, at play. And so doing that inside of the Walt Disney Company, right, once we got that blessing to make that go forward, and because like, yes, this is a story, this makes sense, right?
It was incredible, man.
It became the most rewarding and most challenging project I've probably ever worked on.
And it's now the most heartbreaking story, I think, one of in the entire game industry. I was right there covering all of this stuff, and I was absolutely blown away. I'd have mad appreciation for Avalanche as a developer. They'd already done tons of different cool ideas. I love the art design. I love talking to the developers that were crafting the toys and all of that stuff together. I'm a big toy nerd, you can probably tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I love sharing that with my daughter as well. And it blew her mind that she could do all of this creativity. Now she's addicted to Roblox,
right,
using a lot of the fundamentals that Disney Infinity kind of opened up in her mind, that creativity. What went wrong? What happened?
It's really interesting. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah.
And there was really things like we got right, and things that were kind of hit or miss, and things that went wrong, right? The things that were right, to me, the biggest one was that mixing of the IPs, right? Being able to have, and you look at like the very first images that came out for Disney Infinity, you look at the trailers we did, right? It's Captain Jack Sparrow next to Sully, next to Mr. Incredible, right? And you're like, live action with animation of that, it's like, what, crazy. And they're running around. If you look at the advertising we did, then we had a lot of fun with that. I remember when Lone Ranger came out, we did a little thing we put out that had Jack Sparrow coming up to Tonto. And they're like, he's like, you look good. And he's like, oh, you're a nice looking fellow yourself, or they know what they are, right? There's like this meta to it. And it was that conscious, like, we're going to put all this stuff together, which was the absolute opposite of anything you were ever allowed to do at Disney. And we're like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be the tip of the spear and figure that out. That was probably the greatest thing we did. And having the respect for the characters and for those worlds and doing that. The hit or miss stuff was what IPs do you choose? Do you, and how much do you invest in it, right? Play sets were a big investment for us,
right,
in doing that. And, we would at times look to draft off of, well, what was getting a lot of attention inside the company? Where was the backing of the Walt Disney Company? And the Lone Ranger is a great example, right? They put a ton of money into that film. They put a ton of money into marketing it. We did a whole play set around it. None of it did very well because it just didn't hit, right? And so you had these real hit or misses, like trying to identify
it's almost like you couldn't take a risk on something coming up. It had to be something that was already
Right.
out there
But you had to, because that was
because the
part of the
marketing was,
remit, right?
yeah,
Disney
yeah,
Infinity was all about celebrating the past, present, and future of the Walt Disney Company. Like that was our pitch,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we had a lot of ways to do that, all the way down to like we're going to have coins, the power discs that you could use, to just props that you could get in the game, to having NPC type characters, to having the figures, which were like the most expensive single representation, all the way up to play sets, which was the most you could put into something, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that was spending multiple millions of dollars creating, maybe an 8 to 10 or so hour experience set in a specific IP that could only have those IP characters in it. So that's like your biggest limitation against that. Or like Pirates of the Caribbean can only have 3 characters that played through the Pirates of the Caribbean playset. So those were tough choices to make, right? And that all plays into development costs and your marketing and your sales projections. And like that was the big hit or miss. The stuff that really harmed it the most, if you will,
yeah,
I think the 2 biggest elements was, one, when they moved away from mixing the IPs. And if you look at Disney Infinity 3.0 and you look at the marketing materials, you've got Star Wars,
yeah,
Marvel,
right,
Disney,
yeah,
right? And they're all in their separate tranches, and you're like, like where's this? That went away. And
yeah,
I think to the point where people didn't even realize you could still do that in the toy box, right? Because of that separation. I think that hurt it. And then I think just the fact that we had a whole physical goods end of
yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
There we were spinning millions and millions and millions of toys, right? We had to make near field communicator readers, right? That had to plug in. And there was a different one for Xbox than there was for Sony because they had different security protocols, right? You're building a lot of physical stuff. And the only way that it made sense for us to do it was to be vertical. Like we did everything. We made the software, we designed the toys, we designed the electronics, we worked with places in China, right, to factories to spin plastic. We, had to get FCC regulation approvals, big things. You just like it's a
man.
massive endeavor.
What an
And
amazing amount of incredible experience for you, though, as an
yeah,
executive
I
in
mean,
games.
everybody
All
walked away from
everybody,
that.
yeah,
I know way more about how to make a toy than I ever thought I would. And ultimately, like it was the combination, the weight of all of that,
yeah,
right? Which
yeah,
meant even if you were making great money, top line, boy, there's a lot of hands along the way
right,
that are all taking their pieces, right?
right.
To
Do
where
you think,
you're
like, we're in the era of crossplay now and PlayStation publishing on Xbox? Do you think that there would have been? I mean, this is all hypothetical and
sure.
in retrospect, but would you be able to have gone back to the players and said, okay, to PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, and said, let's just make it a universal standard. It's one set. It can work on all the things. And do you think that would have made a difference?
I think to a degree it would have. I mean,
Yeah.
we were one of, if not the first game that had data that was platform agnostic.
Yeah.
So I could start building a toy box on my Xbox,
Yep.
save it to my Disney account, later download it on my tablet, on my iPad, do some more work on my toy box, build some stuff, test it out, save it back to the cloud, go over to your house and you've got a PlayStation, right? And so we download the toy box and play it together at your PlayStation. And I could have brought my toy and put it on there, right? So we had elements of crossplay. What we were never able to do was you're on your PlayStation, I'm on my Xbox, our buddies playing on their Wii U. Let's all join together and play in the same world, right? Play in the same toy box. Like that was the walled garden we couldn't get across, but we did everything we could to at least make, the toys physically. Of course, I can bring that with me and go to anybody's house I want to, and then make the data live everywhere. So I think that now when you look at things like a Genshin Impact, which is like, look, you're just going to play our game wherever you want to play it, right? And I think that's a huge, huge deal to be able to do that. I think that would have helped a lot. But the thing that I think, really got to be maybe the final stake in the coffin is the Walt Disney Company didn't want to make video games anymore, right? They're like, we want to return to a licensing model, which they do superbly. And they've had some fantastic games come out under this model. Spider-Man, right? Like all the mobile stuff. Like there's just, like they've really have an excellent team there that does that, and led by amazing people like John Drake and Luigi Priori and people that have been in the industry for a long time, know the space, know how to work really, really well with developers, right? And the fact that like I'm super excited to see that they've decided to branch outward with the Star Wars stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what Ubisoft does with that. Oh, and forget that. The one character, maybe more than any other, that I didn't have access to inside of the Lucas Vault is getting his own game again, which is Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Like day one, it was like, we got to have Indy. I got to have some Indiana Jones. And they were like, all Star Wars. We are only Star Wars. Because this was like Ep7 wasn't even out yet. Like, no, we're Star Wars. And, we had designs for that and ideas for that. And we're like, I mean, I grew up, that's one of the things I grew up with that's, was also very influential to me as much as Star Wars. So I love that now through this way of licensing, like, they're doing much more than they ever could have building internally. That being said, none of it's for kids.
Yeah.
And that I think was the real magic of Disney Infinity, was that it was built for families. Right?
Well, it also physicalized and made an interactive experience that was very much what walking through Disneyland was like. Like it really correlated. And I remember seeing Disney Infinity setups at Disneyland, and it just made sense. But I know all of the pieces that sabotaged the ability for it to just continue to go. It was just ahead of its time.
It's hard, right? It's hard when you have something like, we know this is great, and and we know that it works.
Yeah. But
is it meeting, the expectations and the needs, of the company, or even the fact that, if you think about it, by the time Disney Infinity 3 came out, we had the market share. Right, Disney Infinity was the biggest Toys to Life game.
Yep.
But there were more people involved because Lego had just come out.
Yep.
Right. So now it's Skylanders and Disney Infinity and Lego, and the number of players didn't grow.
No.
So now we're all competing for the same pie. We're all just trying to get slice of pie. We're like, oh well, I can see how you look at that from a business standpoint. Like, where's this going to go? Is it a shrinking market? Right. Yeah. It's like when it used to be like, hey, I'm the number one game on Macintosh. Right. Like, oh, okay, well, sure. Of no players, congratulations. Right. Not the case anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's, and those are like the brutal business choices. Right. And that's the whole thing. It's that combination of art and fun of making games and technology with the fact that it's still a business. And, I think that's why you'll always see this push for like indie games and indie companies. And can these massive publishers set aside some money to like put into publishing or funding small projects or medium-sized projects? So like not everything has to be, the next sequel or the next franchise thing. Like, how do we start the new stuff? And that seems tough. That's what we're out doing now, right? I'm at Author Digital, and I'm back in the indie space. We have a team that goes out and we've got demos, and, we're like, hey, here's the thing we want to do. Right. And it's fascinating, right? I will say the biggest difference from any time before that I've gone out with the hat looking for money to make something.
Yeah.
Is the diverse nature of funding that's available.
Right.
Like it used to be, you'd go out and there's like, here's the 2 or 3 ways you're going to get funding. There's pub dev, and there's a VC model. And then there's like, maybe a thing that like, here's a home office way it gets done. Now it's like everyone you talk to has at least some slight variation on the theme. Right. So it's becomes really challenging, right? It's very frothy. There's a lot of money in games right now, a lot of money getting invested in games. And if you watch the gaming news, like unbelievable numbers getting thrown around for acquisitions.
Yes.
Boy, if there's one job I'd want right now, just for like, if I like pushing big numbers around, to be the CFO at Embracer, I guess, because they're like buying a lot of stuff.
I just talked about them yesterday in the rundown. Yeah.
It's which amazing. Is amazing. But at the same time, like it's like dating. You have to go out with a lot of people to find your perfect match.
Right.
Right. And it's great that there's that many more people, but it also becomes like a lot more work to go out and talk with everybody.
Yeah. Well, and the truth of it is still there, though. Like the gasoline of the future of this business is on good ideas and creative risk taking and visionaries that can kind of take us from where we are right now. I saw one of the questions in here, and it scrolled by. I'm sorry. I don't know who asked it, but what are you thinking about for the future of gaming right now? What are you thinking? When you look into your your crystal ball? What are we going to be seeing?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a few things. One, I think that we're starting to see it now, and there's a couple of really good examples of it. But basically, tearing down the walls of caring where you play, right? Yeah. That's the promise of things like Stadia, right? That's the reality of things like a Genshin Impact, right? Where it's like
Game Pass.
In Game Pass, right? Like play what you want, where you want, how you want, right? I think we'll see more games that are designed to be like, oh, I don't care what platform you're on, what device you play on, right? If you want to play this game, you play it wherever you want to play it, when you want to play it. I think, one of the things that we're tackling, without divulging too much, is how do we have that same mentality, right? Play what you want, where you want, when you want. But how do you do that within a franchise across genres? Right. So if you look at something like, I always use the MCU as a good example, right? Or just Marvel, right? It's like, you got the MCU. Within the MCU, you have like all these different films, right? That maybe is the way you come into the MCU, but then you're like, oh, but it's all connected. It's part of a greater thing.
I was just going to tweet this. Is there a game series out there where it is all connected, but you can play totally different experiences from product to product, and it's still part of a massive game world? And and that's what you're working on. Very cool.
I didn't say that, but I'm just touching my nose a lot like Santa. But it's the same thing. But then if you look at the greater Marvel universe, and especially now with Disney Plus, right, you're like, you've got TV shows and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did this too. There's a TV show that ties into the film universe that, by the way, is drawing from the comics.
Yes.
Right. And is part of, so you have all these different touch points. I can come into that ecosystem.
Yes.
Where I enjoy it. Right. And I can experience it there, but it's all connected. Right.
Right.
And I think that that's challenging.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have to go into it to your point, to your hypothetical question. Yeah. Right. Like, how would you do that? You have to go into it, know you're doing it, and have the buy-in that, yes, we are going to build games that are going to connect.
It has to really be hard. With an established IP, though. You could
do it with an original IP, right? But I would even posit potentially it's easier because then you're making the rules up as you go. Yeah. But if you're doing it with an established IP, you have to have the buy-in from the franchise holder, right? And the people making it. Yeah.
And the legacy fans.
Right. Because
they got to be first in. Yeah.
Because the thing that's tough, right, is if you're talking about, like, if you were doing it with Marvel as an example, right, you're not going to get all these developers to say, oh, by the way, here's all the hooks you have to put in to be able to, like, they're like, dude, I'm making my game. That's hard enough. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then you have to have time or money way that they connect. Right. So it's as much a design challenge and a franchise portfolio management challenge as it is a technology challenge. But so I think that's why we don't see it yet. Yeah,
but it is definitely the future. If we're talking about the future, this metaverse type thing, like
and it's tackling it in different ways. Like Raph is trying to tackle this, right? Raph Koster, with what he's doing. He's doing it where it's not disparate games, but he's making like a world that you can pick the thing you do in that world. Yeah. And you can go have fun just doing that and do that really well, but you're still connected in this massive universe, right?
I think I just had Yacht Club on last week, and I think they just did it with Shovel Knight as well, right? They just let you play as all those different characters. That's an example right there. I'm sure people are putting that in.
I think that's going to be where, like, we've got to go, right, as an industry, because it's where so many other places have already gone. The thing that makes us unique, and I think always makes us unique, is that we are interactive media. Yeah. Right. I can watch films, I can have this connection, and like the MCU discussion and example only goes so far. Yeah. Right. Because the thing that doesn't happen is I can't do something while I'm watching the movie that enriches my comic reading experience.
Yeah, let's stop there for 1 sec, okay? Because I am a big comic nerd too, and I have the Marvel Ultimate,
Yeah.
subscription. So I'm reading just tons and tons of books, and I love the connection. I just read the Vision series that Tom King
Hmm.
did because of WandaVision, and it's
Right.
awesome, and it feels like there's some correlation that's going to
Hmm.
happen in the new show. Like, I don't want to spoil.
Well, I can't talk about it. I watched it tonight. I've
Yeah,
watched it
it's so
tonight.
good. It's so good. But it doesn't feel like when I read those books, unless they're based on the movie, that they're really interconnected and linked. You can see
Right.
where the movie people borrowed what they wanted out
Right.
of the comics, but it doesn't go back the other way.
Right.
However, if you read the Star Wars comics, and I don't know if you've been reading the Marvel Star Wars books, those feel like you're reading the scripts for offshoot stories or offshoot
Right.
shows. Like they are so interconnected because Lucas draws the line exactly how all of this stuff has to come together.
Right.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and it's kind of the inverse. It's like Kevin Feige has got the keys to Marvel, and he's laying down how all of these different tendrils are going out. But he's just taking inspiration from the books. The books aren't
Right.
saying this is how you go. Whereas with Star Wars, it's the movies, but they are being very protective about where all of the storytellers go with all of this. And so when
That's
you
very
read the
much
Star
how
Wars
those.
comics, it's amazing.
That's very much how those franchises are built, right? One
Yeah.
of the things and again, you learn a lot when you get to live there and have the honor of working with them, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I started at Disney, I was like, I never thought I'd go to Disney, but Warren Spector messaged me. He's like, oh, hey, we need somebody to come in and run some Marvel stuff, which I can do that, right? The games that Disney was building at the time. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great because you guys just got Marvel. So I was like, well, I went to Disneyland as a kid. I grew up in all this Disney stuff. Oh, and you've got Marvel. Like I was a Marvel reader, right?
Yeah.
And a DC reader. I was all about Marvel when I grew up, whole thing. And then while I was there, they acquired Lucas. I'm like, okay, well, that's like 98% of
And
my.
I noticed your Force Awakens poster back there, and
Yeah.
and so you were at Disney as they were making the Force Awakens and releasing. What was
Yeah.
that like for you as a Star Wars? You got Jedi back there, but you've also got Force Awakens. That must
Yeah,
have been just insane.
it was amazing. I mean, the big thing was like that was a huge push, right? They acquired Lucas. They're like, we're coming out with Episode 7, coming out with Force Awakens. It's a huge deal. You can't touch anything else with Star Wars,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we got to see a lot of stuff early because we were making a playset for it for Disney Infinity.
Yeah.
I had the like ridiculous. Like I sometimes things happen, and I talk about them. I don't want to ever give off the impression I'm bragging about this stuff because it's just surreal to me that I got to do these things.
Yes.
I'm just this guy who got into big video games.
Dude, you're with the right audience right now. We're all like, what happened?
So we were every 2 years they would do this executive retreat at Disney World.
Yeah.
Right. And so the one year I went was it was earlier in the year that Force Awakens was coming out.
Yeah.
So I had two like crazy opportunities. One, each division, and there was 7 divisions inside the Walt Disney Company. They did like not Sing with the Stars, but they used to have an attraction that was not The Voice, the other one, America's Got Talent.
American Idol
God.
or
American Idol. My
Yeah.
God, there we go.
Yeah.
That one thing that slipped out of my brain.
Yeah,
We should
know all the reality shows.
They're all the same, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but but they had the American Idol attraction there where people
Yeah.
could sign up. So they said, "Oh, we want one representative from each division to come and do American Idol." Right? For all these executives. So we had a competition inside of Interactive and I won. So then I got to go represent Interactive, right? And so it was crazy. It's like, I'm singing on the, like, yes, it's an attraction in the park, but you still are like, oh, this is really great.
Yeah.
And like John Lasseter was one of the judges and like he played the Simon Cowell role, and so it was like really fun. We did that. And so I was like, oh, okay. And that was for me lucky because it was like, oh, that was the first one I went to. And so I got to like, suddenly now everybody at least knows my name. So now I'm getting to meet all these other executives from parks and theatricals and, Imagineering and all these different places, which was great. So I'm like, oh my God, that was the best way for me to like, at least everybody knows my name so I can talk to them now.
That's awesome.
But then the film group always does a big presentation and they come up and that's where before shareholders and you see it, they're like, here's the slate of films that are coming out. Like, so they're like, here's all the Star Wars stuff, here's the Marvel stuff. And in the Star Wars one, they say, okay, we have something really special. We're going to be showing you the first 23 minutes of Force Awakens.
Amazing.
And everybody's like, what? I mean, and you've got like executive vice presidents that have been at the Walt Disney for 25 years. They're like, all like everybody's a kid again.
Yeah.
Right. And the lights go down and they start it. And it was the film all the way up until Han and Chewie come on the bridge.
Oh my
Right.
God.
The Falcon, they like,
Chewie, I'm home.
and like, we're home.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody got, and I just said it right now, I got chills.
Totally.
And then that was it. That's where it ended. And you could hear every single person go, ah, like they're all like, no, what's next? What
I know, right? That's fantastic.
And so it had that kind of impact, not just like, what could it do to the bottom line and how much money do we pay for the acquisition, right? It was about people were like, yes, new Star Wars. Oh my God, I saw Han and Chewie. Like, who is Rey? What's happening? Like, it was all that excitement and electricity. And one of the things that Star Wars can do for me is it can make me 12 again.
Yeah.
And that happened during the last episode of the most recent season of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Like
God.
Twice, two times.
Yeah.
And my wife would tell you, I stood up out of my chair. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, freaking out. Right. And I don't know how long things have to be spoilers, but you can imagine where those scenes are.
Yeah.
If you watch that episode. One of them is right before the end of the episode. The other one is after the credits. Those are the two for me.
Yeah.
And it, like, more than anything, right? And maybe it's because of when I saw it. Maybe it's because of my obvious connection to it, right? It still can do that to me. And to me, that's like a hallmark of great entertainment and great storytelling. And I talk to people that have those feelings with video games.
Yeah.
Right. I still have people, and this speaks to what a brilliant storyteller Chris Metzen is. I have people who can be like, oh my God, Kerrigan, right? They remember the moment in StarCraft where Kerrigan's betrayed by Minsk, right? And then comes back as the Queen of Blades. Spoilers if you haven't played StarCraft. And comes back on the Zerg side, and they're like, oh, it was crazy. Like, you look at the lore that has built up over the last 25, 26 years around Warcraft. Right? It's become this zeitgeist. I talk to people that don't know video games at all, but I mentioned Warcraft. Like, oh, you like World of Warcraft? Because it was a Jeopardy answer, right? I mean, it's like things reach a certain point, and so people have that connection. I've met people that met playing video games, established a relationship playing video games, got married, and that's how they met. I'm in the Universal Life Church. I'm a minister.
Yeah.
I've married people. I have two friends of mine that I married. I performed their service, and they met playing World of Warcraft.
That's amazing.
All their guildmates were there, and they had me write stuff into the ceremony that was like, by the power invested in me by the state of California and the Kingdom of Azeroth, I now permit, like it's all in there, right? Because that's their cultural touch point that has meaning to them, and I think that's something that, when you're crunching numbers on game systems or figuring out where your monetization choke points are going to be, or how much money gets put into marketing, you can lose sight of that other element of it. Right?
Well, I think that there's something about just hearing you talk about it. It's like we're having a conversation next to a fire and we're camping or something like that. And I think that there's something pure with the way that we make stories, whether we play them in games or watch them on screens or read them in books. If we can say them in front of a fire and still move somebody, that's the value, And that's what I don't want to see happen with games. Like my biggest fear with games is that in the future it will be robots making games for robots, Like, it's just going to be data, drill, and like if you get really trippy, like if you like smoke a joint and just go all crazy with this kind of cyborg reality that we all live in, like always connected to the internet. If you extrapolate that, and we're always connected to the internet, and we all have the same access to the information, where does we lose our humanity, right? And I feel like games could do that, the way that they make them, if they forget that we're not just a data point. We're passion, we're different tastes and different ideas and different intersect points in. But when you create content, it needs to when you create like Star Wars or what, it needs to bring us all in too, you know?
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing too where, I just went and I was quickly tapping to find like the transcript of, like that original intro for Warcraft, which
Yeah.
of course I have no distinct memory of writing, but it was all about, in the age of chaos, two factions battled for dominance. The kingdom of Azeroth was a prosperous one. The humans who dwelled there turned the land into a paradise. The Knights of Stormwind and the clerics of Norshire Abbey roamed far and wide, serving the king's people with honor and justice. The well-trained armies of the king maintained a lasting peace for many generations. Then came the Orcish hordes. I mean, it's like the whole idea is like, how do we set the stage?
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that I love about games is like, that's all. How do we set that stage? Because then the player is going to be in the game writing
their story,
their history, and it's their story. Right.
Yeah.
And that's
why I love it too. That's why I created EP. It was like, oh my God, this is a medium that is, it doesn't even know what its potential is. It doesn't, because it's constantly reinventing itself. And holy crap, we have to expose this creativity to the world because it is.
And I
limitless.
still don't think we know what the potential is.
We don't.
Right? Every time something happens that becomes this like massive explosion.
Yes.
Right. It's people like, oh, where did that come? PUBG. Where did that come from? Right.
Totally. Yeah.
And I mean, I love, and we both know Gary Whitta really well. Right.
Yeah.
I love that Gary took Animal Crossing. He's like, oh, I'm going to do a talk show.
Yeah.
In it. Like, we're going to take these two disparate things. I'm going to take Twitch and I'm going to take a video game and we're going to put them together.
Yeah.
Right. To then create this new form of entertainment.
It's wonderful.
Right. It's just, it's that. And that's what I love about it. Because I think that people that play games are also incredibly creative. Right.
Yes.
And that's why they play them, because they're interactive. They're like, oh, how can I solve this puzzle? How can I find a way to do this? How can I, win this or collect this? And they're the ones that are always crying, like, we want more story and better story. And what do I get to do as a character?
Yeah.
And when you look at like you talked about your daughter that grew up playing things like Disney Infinity and Roblox and Minecraft, I posit that today they don't want to just sit through your story.
Yeah.
They want to be a part of it. They want to have some way to control it or contribute to it. Right. So it's not just sit down, shut up and play my game. Like, can we create experiences, even from a storytelling standpoint, that are more personal and more open to the input of the player to take you a different direction? Like the Telltale stuff scratched that itch. Right. I made a choice. The choice meant that character lost an arm. Later in the game, they still don't have an arm. Hey, consequence to my choice, my action.
Yeah.
Right. That's the tippy tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Right. I'll be fascinated to see in the next 25 years where we go.
Yeah, it's incredible. Bill, this was the fastest hour and a half I've ever had talking to somebody. And
because I talk a lot, Victor. I just go on and on and on.
It's fascinating, and I know everybody that's tuned in is. I saw somebody tweet, "This is the best podcast on the internet." And it's just, it's a fantastic conversation, and I think everybody that's here would agree. I'm sure I didn't get to any questions, but here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make this part one of our chat,
sure.
Because there's a ton we didn't get into, and there's many other aspects to your career and your drive and your passions. We didn't get into your music making, all of this stuff that I wanted to talk to. I didn't expect the hour to fly by that fast, like it really, I looked up, I'm like, holy crap, it's 4:00 already.
It's because you ask good questions, Victor. It's all on you. You bring it out.
Man. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to have this convo. I've got a lot of pleas. Let's keep it going. I have a rundown I have to finish. I have to post that, and I've got a weekend that I have to have with my family. So, but I would love to have you back.
All right.
And we can take it offline. We don't have to sort of commit to the date right now, but as soon as you are free, I would love to pick this up again and dive a little bit deeper into Disney and dive a little bit deeper into Hellgate London. And you moved to London for some time.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to bring all of that into our next conversation. And so can we call this part one?
Absolutely. I'm all in.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Bill Roper. And as you can tell, he's a fascinating, very storied individual with lots of great, experiences to share. And we'll have him back on Vic's Basement very soon. Thank you so much, Bill. That was wonderful.
Thank you for
all.
inviting me into your basement, Vic.
Oh, you rock, man. Thank you all for watching, and thank you for listening. And those that are listening, you can watch these shows, and I've been doing them live, actually, on Fridays at 3 p.m. Pacific on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/EPNTV. And I also want to give a big shout out again to our sponsor, the Gaming Stadium. They are Canada's leader in online esports tournament facilitation. They've got tournaments going on every weekend. You can find out more at tgs.gg. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you soon. And until then, play forever. All right. Sorry, 1 second here. And